Transition and holy shit.
Holy shit.
And we're into it. What's going on, everybody?
What up?
Welcome back to the Little Dicey podcast. My name is Salvatore. This is Matthew. We are your co-hosts here at A Little Dicey. This is episode 5. If you count all of the episodes beforehand, then maybe this would be episode like 10 or some shit like that, but whatever, who gives a shit. This is the real deal. For those of you who are joining us on this Saturday afternoon and you're like, well, I thought this was on Fridays. It usually is. I'm just the worst, and man, my schedule's packed sometimes, and Matt is flexible enough to where he can he just bends over backwards because he's a sweet boy.
I've been stretching.
He been stretching. First time, what the fuck is going on over here? Holy moly! Oh, okay, maybe it might have. Oh, okay, it might have been some less than cool things, but whatever. Shouts out to Michaela for moderating the chat. Thank you, Michaela, for keeping things kosher. That's hilarious.
You guys are getting spicy.
I know. I guess morning. I have no idea what's going on this Saturday morning, but whatever.
Mika with the band hammer.
I know, hitting him with the band hammer. Hell yeah, fuck them. Whatever. Oh well, shit.
Wait, was it porn?
It was it porn?
Because if it was porn, bring him back.
Yeah, I know. Well, whatever. We'll figure it out. Yeah, damn. Well, good shit. Who cares? Thanks. Shout out to Mika. So real quick before we jump into our usual discussion for the past few episodes, what was I going to say? We're just be on the lookout for a couple cool things this week when it comes to. I'm going to move this mic over here. Just when it comes to programming and certain things. We made a couple of announcements in the Discord, so if you're new, join the Discord, check that out, see what's going on. Some slight changes going on with the show, but we are going to be updating a few things when it comes to sort of promotional stuff, which is going to be very fun. And then we may or may not, we will have a sponsor when the next episode airs for the Great and the Leaning Crown, episode 24, I believe. So be on the lookout for that. The very next thing you can check us out after we finish up here with the podcast is next Tuesday. Every Tuesday evening at about 8 to 9 p.m. We go live here on Eastern Standard Time. We go live here on the channel for our reroll show, a Little Dicey reroll, where we essentially rewatch a couple moments from the past week's episode. We're going to be revisiting episode 23 again for next week's reroll, since we had a hiatus of our usual episode this past Wednesday. I don't know if I'll be there or not. Hopefully, we're going to try to get a couple players to talk about some things. But usually, myself as the dungeon master for that show, I get to answer a couple questions or give you a couple sneak peeks behind the screen with our hosts and chat moderators, Aaron and Michaela. So, those are a couple things just off the top. But here on the podcast, myself and Matt, we just sort of chill. We talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, but right now we have kind of like a series going on. Open up Google Chrome. Yeah, hit that open. For whatever reason, it must have exited out of that. Go ahead and just type in tier make. Oh no, we can't even type that in because whatever. Fuck it. We'll just go live. Who cares? We'll just wing it. You guys will be fine. We can give you an oral recount of what we've rated so far. Yes. But the past couple of episodes, we've been talking about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition classes, and we've been sort of rating them on our tier from S for sucking, because everybody loves a good suck, everybody loves giving a good suck, all the way down to F tier, which is just flirty, like just, maybe a little bit of hand holding, you're not all the way in, you're not all the way out, and it's like, it's a little bit, but it's not enough.
It's just hand stuff.
It's not. And everything in between, A, B, C. I don't remember if we have a D tier or not, but fuck it, whatever. We'll be making stuff up for this episode like we usually do anyways. So, so far, we started off with possibly everyone's favorite class, which is hilarious, but we started off with the Bard. We ended up rating them F tier, man. When it comes to our system of rating for the 5th edition classes, we're trying to look for. Well, actually, Matt, why don't you always have a better sort of quantification of how we are rating these classes.
So this should not be taken as a power ranking. Most people do power rankings. Yes. We could definitely do power rankings, and we'll talk a little bit about classes power as we go through the classes. But largely, what we're talking about here is, in our sort of opening, and I don't think we really meant to do this, but in our sort of opening discussion before we started doing classes, we spent a lot of time talking about kind of fulfilling or supporting fantasies.
Yes.
Right. And so that's kind of the perspective that we're taking, or that we're using to rank these subclasses, is how well do basically the mechanics of the class support what the player both what the player would hope the class does, just because of examples in media, things like that, and also just is the class itself, does it have consistency, and does it have these sort of like logical things that don't make sense? And so, for the bard, just to kind of run through them real quick, for the bards are very powerful. They have kind of all of the sort of skill monkey stuff that the rogue has, and they're full spellcasters.
Yeah,
there's no denying
tight.
that bards are super powerful. The thing is whenever I've seen a bard play, including our own bard, nothing about them ever feels like a bard to me. And so the conclusion, when you think about a bard, you're thinking about this sort of traveling musician, this keeper of lore, this person that's inspiring the people around them. Their mere presence makes everybody else more powerful. And, they end up at the table just feeling like charisma wizards.
Yeah.
Right?
It's funny because I also kind of thought about this a little bit. The only sort of bard that off the top of my head, where I'm like, oh yeah, that felt like a bard. It's really only because of the heavy amount of role play that he put into it. But I mean, like Sam Riegel's Scanlan, it like feels like a bard, but that's, your class should not feel like what it's supposed to be because of the amount of role play that you put into it.
Only because of exactly.
It's legitimately like if Sam Riegel didn't put that much of his fucking Sam Riegel pussy into it, you know what I mean? Then like, it wouldn't have felt like a bard. Like it would have been exactly like you said. It's just a charisma wizard.
And even if any of you've seen the Vox Machina animated series, they make it very clear in the series that the iconic spell of Scanlan is, they call it Scanlan's hand.
Scanlan's hand,
Bigby's hand in the in the official books. And when I think of what I would expect the iconic spell of a bard to be, it would not be summoning a hand that punches things and carries me around.
Right, exactly.
Right? That just feels like a conjuration spell by a wizard. So so that's kind of why we ranked the bard so low, just because it doesn't, to me or to Sal, feel like it is what you would expect it to be, even though it's very powerful. And then with the wizard I think has the benefit of being.
Sorry to interrupt you. Thanks for the raid, y'all. Shouts out to Dice and Andy. Hell yeah, you guys. We're just sitting talking about the 5th edition classes right now. We're rating them and everything. This episode we're talking about the Warlock, but right now we're just sort of recounting what we've been talking about before with our bards.
We're just kind of recapping that we're not doing a power ranking. We're doing how well are the classes and the mechanics therein suited to support the fantasy that the player would expect to have. And for the wizard, I think it's obviously we ended up ranking it an A. So we obviously like it. The things that held it back were not really flavor problems, but were more just like kind of logical inconsistencies.
Yeah, it was just a lot of weird
wizard who should have incredible memory and recall by nature, right? For some reason, if they lose their book, they can't remember a single spell.
Yeah, it just doesn't really make much.
And they got a book full of spells, and they're like, man, I really wish I could summon a ladder right now. I got this spell in my book right in front of me.
Can't do it.
I'm going to need 8 hours to figure out my own notation.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. So just because of the way the spell book works is kind of weird, we ended up dropping it from the initial S. And then last week, we covered the Druid, the class that I'm currently playing in our Great Naledian Crown campaign.
The best class in the fucking game, dude.
It's an absolute, from a flavor perspective, it's an absolute slam dunk.
It's a banger. Druids rip at every single point in the game at any level you could play. It feels great. You get some really Druid. Yeah, absolutely. Dyson, like Druids, just everything about the Druid feels good. You have a big selling point for when we were talking about it last week was the unique spells that you get from your spell list. Like, I mean, the only other comparable thing is kind of cleric, but even if you look at the cleric spell list, like it doesn't. It's just under the Druid spell list. If you're looking at the shit like Burst of Thorns or Sunbeam or Moonbeam or Sunlight or any of these things, it's just like, dude, this feels like I'm a fucking nature spellcaster. Like everything is visceral and it feels like it should be a part of the class. And they just feel good to have like in the party. Like they're super versatile. They can fill almost any niche. You can be a tank, you could be a healer, you could be a DPS. Like you can do anything, or you could just be, you could have a lot of fun role playing as much as you want, in addition to having mechanics that support your role playing. You know what I mean? So Druids are the best. That's why we put Druids in S tier. Druids absolutely. Oh, by the way, you guys probably just joined in before we explained what are it's really stupid now that I'm thinking about it, but I like it, so it doesn't matter. But S tier, obviously we all know S tier stands for suck, because everyone loves getting a good suck, everyone loves giving a good suck, you know what I'm talking about. So druids absolutely suck, and bards are just a little bit flirty, you know. That's how it is.
This ranking system was definitely well thought out.
Yep.
And carefully put together. It definitely wasn't something we randomly said in the first episode.
Yeah.
And adopted it to this.
Yep.
Before we even thought we were going to do these.
Before we even thought we were going to do this,
just
for whatever reason.
So yeah, man. So that kind of sets the table. And today we're talking about my first 5th edition class, which is the Warlock.
The Warlock. So here's the thing. Off the rip, I don't necessarily know. I mean, I know Warlocks very well because you played one. I DM'd for you when playing one. But they are also they're sort of my favorite. I think the Warlock is my favorite class just because next to Paladin, I think it intrinsically, like any class where you have a patron or a deity or whatever, it immediately gives you so much sort of focus into what you would want to be doing with the character, right? Yeah. So you could be a wizard, but you kind of have to go out of your way to be like, all right, so why am I a wizard? Why this? Like, why do I have these values? Whatever, blah, 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 which is great. Same thing with bard, really same thing with any class, especially like fighter or barbarian, like that. You really have to like go out of your way to like really sort of make this character interesting, because I mean, there are a lot of interesting things about about those classes, but there really isn't anything beyond like, all right, I'm just really good at this one thing. Whereas
think about this thing. A lot of times when you're in character creation,
yes,
right, you might go to your players and be like, all right, I want to understand, you know, what your character's goals are, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that probably is often asked is like, who is in your life? Like, who are your friends? What about your family? Like, what's the deal, right?
What are your values?
And the reason that there's so many orphans in D&D is A, because people are like, well, I could just be an orphan and not have to come up with anything.
Exactly.
B, if I have any loved ones, they'll be used against me. We've all seen anime. We've all seen cartoons.
Yep, that's right.
So like, it's just better to be this like lone wolf edgelord, right?
Of course.
And so like, I think for a lot of characters, there's this impulse to just be like, nah, I don't care about anything.
Right. Exactly.
Fuck you, Sal.
Yeah.
Whereas like when you're playing a warlock, you automatically have this relationship that is central to your character.
Yeah.
And so it just like does so much of the work for you, even if with my character of Revelry from campaign 1, his relationship with his patron was very, especially in the beginning, was very sort of mysterious and sort of unknown.
Yeah.
But you could just as easily play someone who is like, you know, having coffee every Sunday with his patron. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You just as easily have someone that's on a very sort of working level. So you could play this any number of ways, either a mystery that's revealed over time, or just like right off the bat, you're like, yeah, my demon daddy's like telling me I got to do this shit. You know? One
of my favorite warlock relationships that I saw recently was, and I had you know this, but I had a lot of feelings about the first season of Exandria Unlimited, which is Critical Role's sort of offshoot show that they do. But I thought it was clever and like kind of original. I had not seen this before. The casual relationship that Amy Carrero had with, so her character was a warlock, and her patron was her sister. And it was like super, like, I mean, the relationship was very interesting, the way she role played it and everything. That was sort of what her focus was, but it was super casual in the sense of like, it was just her sister. And it was like, she would just pop into her head every once in a while and they would have like a little cat fight and then they would continue on or whatever. It was very cool to see. So you can have like this level of like, you know, intimacy or, you know, lack thereof with your patron that's just sort of inherent in the class, which is already cool. The only problem with Warlock is that it feels like, for me off the rip, and I'll to preface this, I'll give you my rating for Warlock off the rip for me, just because I really like it. But when I'm trying to think of it, I just wish the class was sort of intrinsically, like just mechanically different than what it is. I'm sort of off the rip putting it in B tier. Okay. Just because it's my favorite in the sense of I love the patron classes, so cleric, paladin, warlock, some aspects of other classes that they introduce, like with like, oh, you can have like a deity or whatever, like sorcerer gets like divine soul, so that's kind of like a connection there. But cleric, paladin, and warlock generally are the ones where you have a higher power that you directly interface with. Yeah. I just mechanically wish that the warlock was a little bit different, because it just kind of feels like they had the paladin, they had the cleric, and they had that sort of like paladin is half caster, half melee, cleric is a full caster, and then they were like, all right, well, we have the warlock, it's a full caster, but we have like all these other caster classes, and what can we do differently for it? And it is different, and I love the portions of the warlock, you know, with your invocations and stuff like that, but it just feels weird to have to so heavily rely on modifications to a cantrip, essentially, like mechanically, and then only get like X amount of spell slots, which can be fine, like, you know what I mean, like you can it can feel fine, but and I know that technically they just sort of on average will always be able to do like the most consistent amount of damage of all the spellcasters based on their Eldritch Blast and how that levels up. But it just kind of feels like, again, it suffers from that same problem that fighters or just sort of martial classes do. Like as you level up, it's like, all right, I just do this one thing more often. And it kind of sucks because you have such versatility with everything else. It's like, well, why not? It's nice to have consistency. But I would still like the versatility in my consistency. You know what I mean? And you kind of get that with your invocations, but it's just, for me, it's just not enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna ignore that, right?
Yeah, you can ignore it. You can exit out of
Just
it.
making sure that's not gonna be like, you're gonna shut down.
No, you're good.
Five,
You're good.
Whatever.
You can just exit right out of that. No problem.
Left hand. There we go.
Wow,
Okay.
the dexterity.
I did the dexterity. Yeah, we never factor in ambidextrousness into.
Oh yeah.
class.
Should we bump it up now?
Well, I rolled a 9.
Oh, of
well,
course.
you decided to attack with your left
hand. Yeah, that's so
reason,
true.
and you missed.
It's the easiest cop out.
So here's what I say about warlocks: is and first of all, I would give them. To me, I would probably give them like my gut feeling is like a high A.
Yeah, sure.
I wouldn't put them quite in S only because I want to keep that like that territory really, and maybe I'll move them up, but you know, I want to be really skeptical with things in the suck tier.
In the suck tier, of course.
But here's the reason: is actually pack magic is weird.
Yeah,
it is weird. I do like though. So 5e already has 5 full spellcasters, and by full I mean that just have spell casting with the full spell slot progression.
Right.
And a lot of times even that feels like too many to me.
Yeah.
Where they're just too samey.
Yeah.
And so I like that they try to do something with the warlock that's different. And I think it really, just in its weirdness, sort of separates them as like, this is not sort of a, like if you think about the cleric or the paladin, and even though the paladin can sometimes be, you know, secular and not necessarily a religious oath, their sort of patron relationships, so to speak, are like very sort of unified or very like soul bonded in a way. Like they're working hand in hand with their god. They're devoted to their god, or they are devoted to that oath. And so in a way, paladins and clerics feel very much the same to me, which is why I always thought it was weird that one is charisma and one is wisdom. But anyway,
I know
that's,
that's
a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Whereas I like that the fact that warlocks get their unique spellcasting system, and we can talk about whether or not it's a good system.
Yeah,
but
I like that it's unique.
I like that they get this unique system, which is different enough because it reflects the fact that their relationship with their patron is contractual.
Yeah.
Is not, you know, you and me, baby, for life.
Yeah.
It's very much like, not that it has to be contentious, but it's very much contractual. And so I love off the rip that it's different and unique. When I was playing a warlock, I found actually that because of the way that we play, there were lots of opportunities for short rests. And
yes,
so for anybody that doesn't know, warlocks are the only spellcaster that gets all of their spellcasting back on a short rest. The trade-off with that is that they get only 2 spell slots until level, I think, 9. And then they get 3 for a while, and then eventually 4.
Right.
So you have only 2 spells, 2, you know, leveled spells that you can cast in any given combat. The thing that was nice for me is like when you're level
excuse me,
let's say when you're level 9, let's say.
Yes.
Right. So you're going to have 3 spell slots, and they're all level 4 slots. A level 9 wizard probably has what, 1 4th level slot,
something like that. Yeah.
And so in a combat, suddenly the Warlock has 3 times the high-powered spell slots of the Wizard, and guess what? Then after that combat's over, they take a short rest. And now they got
them again.
So like it's like a Warlock might get 12 4th level spell slots at level 9, where a Wizard might only get 1 or 2 if I'm mistaken. So actually, on the other hand, if you're in a campaign where there's tons of gauntlets, right, where you're you never can short rest, then Warlock is incredibly punishing.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing I think people don't like about the Warlock is it's so reliant on your DM's playstyle, whether or not their spellcasting is good or bad. But I do like that it's different. I like that it makes you choose different spells. Yeah. Because your slots are always the highest level. It really doesn't feel good to take shield with a Warlock, for example.
No, it sucks.
It sucks.
It really sucks.
Or to take like a spell like, I don't know, Featherfall, where like a wizard's almost always going to have it prepared because there's no downside.
You're really forced, because of your limitations with, you know, how often you can do the things, and because it forces you to always scale at the highest spell slot, the highest level spell casting for your 2 or slightly more spell slots, you're really forced to only take like the really like powerful spells, which is it's not the worst thing to be forced into, but it's, again, you're so limited with that, and obviously we go back and we go, okay, well, you know, what can we choose with invocations and stuff like that, but those are, I mean, I consistently, when I'm looking at the Warlock, you know, features for the class, those never feel like enough to where I feel satisfied with the lack of the lack of what's the word I'm looking for, diversity in like what you're in your spellcasting, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the way that I look at it is like, having never played a paladin, if I look at the paladin, right, the paladin is mostly attacking. Then they have spell slots for utility, and then they have their smites. Yeah. And the smites are like, I'm about to fuck you up. And then, like, if I was a paladin, I would almost always feel bad casting a spell, because smites are so good.
Most of the time, that's the case. You in some of your oaths that you get for the subclasses for paladin, they give you they do a really good job with giving you the certain spells that you always have prepared with certain oaths that, like, I mean, honestly, like, if they're there, and when I look at them, I kind of like look at the rest of the spell list, and I'm like, why, if I'm taking this oath, I don't really need any other spell. I just need these. So they do a really good job of that, and then you can just sort of pick whatever else you want. It can be as niche as you need it to be. And if you're in a real pinch, you can do that. But again, getting back to the Warlock, you really can't do that. There's no opportunity for you to be like, oh, I could have this in my back pocket just in case, but why the fuck would I ever cast Featherfall at the fucking 6th level? You know what I mean? Like, there's no opportunity for a niche use of that, because you're sort of like, well, I have to take Fireball. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that's part of the spell list, but you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
One thing that kind of oddly enough, where a lot of spell classes are now in the latest designs of subclasses, they're getting always prepared spells. Yeah. Where Warlocks just get spells that they can choose to learn that are outside the Warlock list. Yeah, I would love to see them be you just get these. Yeah. But I think, like, again, just as my experience playing, your bread and butter ends up being your attack, whether it's your Hexblade and you're making actual attacks, or you're any other class and you're making Eldritch Blasts. And it's easy to be like, oh, having the Eldritch Blast all the time is boring, but like, half the classes in the game, all they do is attack on their turn. They're mostly attacking. If you're a monk, you're mostly attacking. If you're a fighter, if you're a barbarian, if you're a rogue, like, your basic action is just an attack. If you just think of Eldritch Blast as your attack, then that's all it is. And then, you know what? When you're like, hey, I'm basically a fighter or a blaster, but I'm about to end this combat with a hypnotic pattern, or I'm about to end this combat with, you know, X spell. I don't know. For me, the spellcasting always felt good, and I just loved that I'm like looking across the table at other spellcasters, and I'm like, dude, I'm about to cast Hypnotic Pattern 4 times today. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of the versatility, I like the Warlock gets just off the top of my head, gets the most versatility and character creation with those invocations of basically anybody. Yeah, 100%. Especially if they're willing to not necessarily go with like the most powerful thing. Right. And if you're like if you're like a fan of like strategy or like war games and stuff, and you like a lot of being able to move the pieces around the board, having not done it because I did play a Hexblade, I got to imagine that being like a mid-level warlock with all of those invocations on your Eldritch Blast, where you get to repel and draw them in and move like being able to move the enemy pieces all around the board at range, cool. Tactically, you know, and you can set up where you set up like a Hunger of Hadar, one of those area effect spells, or like a Wall of Fire, and then you're just like, hey, I'm just gonna keep bumping you back into it. I think there's a lot that you can do outside of just like I'm just gonna cast Eldritch Blast every turn, but yeah, man, I think Warlocks are dope as hell.
Hell yeah. I do want to get to some of our chat real quick. Yeah. So the Weird Warlord asked, what's the key to Warlock design? And I think that's always something good for us to be thinking about when we're sort of ranking these classes. For me personally, I'm going to take this as what would my key to like making the Warlock feel a bit better than what we're talking about personally. I would actually like to see something more along the lines of how Wizards of the Coast has set up the Monk class to entirely revolve around sort of one specific mechanic, which is their key and their unarmed strikes.
I'm going to listen to the rest of this with an open mind and open heart. Sure. But you just said I want to take the Warlock and make them more like the Monk.
No. That's, I mean,
and
okay.
My cock just went all the way up inside my body.
That's not, okay. You're not wrong. Yeah. So, but here's the thing. So what I mean when I say that is that I think that if there was a way to, I really like that they tried to make the spellcasting portion of the Warlock unique, right? I think that that's a good idea. I do not necessarily think that means limiting the amount of spell slots that you have and then forcing it to just be upcast. I don't necessarily think that's the best choice. It's fine. I think it works. I love the Warlock class. It's my personally, it's my favorite class, right up next to the Paladin, just because I love both of those fantasy ideas. So this is me just kind of wanting there to be a little bit more focus on sort of the direct feature of the Warlock, which is essentially your Eldritch Blast and then a couple other things revolving around like your Pact. So I would personally completely do away with spell slots for the Warlock. I think the Warlock would be your spellcaster. Then their niche would be, you don't worry about spell slots. Like, you don't worry about preparing anything. You don't worry about, whatever, like on the daily, or you don't pick from you do not pick from a spell list. You don't have spell slots. You have your cantrips, right? And you have like a fuckload of cantrips. That's your versatility there. And then your invocations will be even larger and more broad. And you get a bunch of things that affect your Eldritch Blast, which you already do, but maybe a couple more powerful things down the line. That way that fills the gap of like, all right, well, it kind of feels like I hit like a power cap on my potency, but as I level up, you just give me more attacks, right? So that's kind of like the fighter's problem. There's no cap on there's a hard cap on potency for the fighter, but there's not a cap on like, you get more attacks as you level up, right? So like that's the fighter's thing. So, oh, thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. No worries. Shouts out to my dad, just saying what's up at the studio. But I would like to see a little bit more of this sort of laundry list of cantrips that you can have, and then your invocations and stuff affecting any one of these cantrips that you want to do. So you're always able to do something, but you know that your bread and butter is like, all right, my Eldritch Blast. But then you have, whatever side, PowerPoint or whatever for the class, like key or something like that, where you're just like, oh, I can make my Eldritch Blast become the Hunger of Hadar, you know what I mean? And then like I put that over here, and then I could go back to Eldritch Blast or whatever, you know what I mean? You don't have to necessarily worry about spell slot not manipulation, but you know what I mean? You don't necessarily have to worry about your spell slots. You just have to worry about your quote unquote sorcery points or your quote unquote key points, you know what I mean? And then you just have the versatility of all these cantrips. Because a lot of times cantrips feel really good to cast because they have their niche applications. But as you level up, you know, those niche applications, especially in combat, become less and less. Some cantrips level up with you as you, you know, get whatever. They just get more powerful, like Firebolt, I think Extra mentioned. No, I got you, bro. I got you, Weird Wizard, or Weird Warlord, excuse me. But yeah, for sure. I just think that I would prefer that the Warlock has more versatility. And if they want to keep the uniqueness, which I love about the spellcasting, I would just do away with this with their main spellcasting feature, which is spell slots. And then, you know, you can have someone who really likes the, you know, caster classes and then be like, oh shit, this class just entirely focuses on cantrips and then like modulates the power level of the cantrips as you level up. I think that's really fucking cool. But you obviously limit how powerful you can make the cantrips with a point buy system, essentially.
So I would like my gut reaction to that is a lot of that I'd have to see in practice, because
right, you would have
just
to
replace that. If you just replace spell slots with points that let you cast spells, and that's just feels like kind of the same.
Kind of, it's kind of the same thing. Yeah.
You know, I'm obviously you didn't communicate all the details because you couldn't. The thing that
I might go in there and
see what you have to do.
Yeah,
actually, when you talk about having a class that's focused on like the versatility of cantrips and not having spell slots, but being able to augment those cantrips in interesting ways, that to me feels like, okay, now we're talking about a different implementation of Bard again.
That's also true,
right?
Yeah,
because when I think about what is the flavor to me of a class that has a wide breadth of versatility, jack of all trades, Bard, and it would be interesting to be able to augment that in unique ways. I don't know. As you were describing that, I was like, I think you mean the Bard. Because actually, one thing that I think could be problematic, not in the traditional way, but like,
it's racist.
Yeah. One thing that I think might be racist about making the Warlock more versatile is actually, I just think that the risk becomes that they just feel more like every other class again.
Sure.
Because what happens is, have you ever seen, this might be a somewhat niche example, but have you ever seen Hunter x Hunter? By any chance?
I love Hunter x Hunter. Yeah.
So you know when, you know Killua, right? Assassin Boy.
The illest character in the show.
So he's like just this badass. He's a child.
He's a literal child.
Yeah, he's a literal child, but he's just like this badass fucking killer. Like, let's just say
absolute savage.
Let's just say he's a fighter.
Yeah,
let's just say.
Sure.
But then every once in a while, the literal background of the animation, like the background fades away and it turns like fucking purple, and his eyes go kind of like crazy white.
Yep.
And it's just sort of like becomes incredibly creepy. And then he just like, it's never really well described or shown, but he basically like channels this like familial, you know, ancestral,
like
bloodlust and assassin ability. And all of a sudden everyone's just fucking dead.
It just cuts and then like, oh, so this dude's heart is in a bag.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because that to me feels like very Warlock.
It's very Warlock.
Like he's a dude. He's ostensibly like a fighter.
Yeah.
He's good in a fight, and normally he's just out there fighting.
Yep.
But then once in a while, with his 1 or 2 spell slots or whatever, he's like, I'm about to end this fight.
Yeah.
And he channels something very powerful. And in this case, it's not really a pact. It's more of like an ancestral ability. But like, you know, I imagine like you're playing let's say you're playing like a Fiend Pact Warlock, right? And your bread and butter is you're fighting with your Eldritch Blast or whatever. But then all of a sudden you go within yourself and you make that connection with your Fiend patron and you're like, Demon Daddy, give me the power to end this fight.
Yeah.
And so when you do use your spell casting,
I love it when my Demon Daddy gives me the payout, dude. Yeah. It's the best.
Give me that payout.
Give me that payout, Demon Daddy.
When you do use your spell casting, it feels like holy shit, because you are casting everything at that high level.
Right.
And I just think that like, if ultimately what you're doing is you're giving the Warlock ways to cast more spells at lower levels, more utility stuff, then all of a sudden they just start to feel like a wizard again, or start to feel like a bard again.
Sure.
It is not just a differently flavored one of any of the other spellcasters, which at first glance makes people be like, oh, I'm used to having like I think Extra said in the chat, I'm used to having 9 spell slots, and now I only get 2. That fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And the thing is you're just not really a full spellcaster.
You're not.
If anything, I think you are closer to a kind of a half caster, but you get that's why I love it so much, is you have fewer spell slots, but they're still incredibly impactful. And at the end of the day, you're still going to cast 9th level spells at the end of your thing. So I actually really like the Warlock, although I could totally understand if you're a new player to your circle and you're like, I'm planning on getting 4 short rests a day.
Right.
And your DM's like, fuck no. If you guys stop moving for a second, arrows are going to fly.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're totally fucked.
That would suck. And I will also say, just from like a quality of life standpoint, and there's some other classes like this, like even as a druid, you get your wild shapes back in a short rest.
Yeah.
But just from a quality of life standpoint, after every fight being like, okay guys, we're gonna rest, right?
Right.
And then you cast one spell and then you're like, well, we might as well rest, right? So I get that. Right?
Gotta rest.
But that's just like, there are other classes that have that. That's just a quality of life thing.
Right.
Like that's why I almost just think that like short rest should just be like, well, same thing with ritual casting, right? For anybody that's not, this maybe you'd never even notice anyway.
Sure.
But normally when you cast a ritual spell, you add 10 minutes to the casting time.
Which is...
And I asked Sal, like, can we just homebrew this to be 1 minute? It means I can still never cast it in a combat, but I'm not asking the party to wait 10 minutes every time I want to cast detect magic.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, and you sort of did this with this homebrew feat that we don't need to bother talking about in detail, but like, if that becomes a problem for your circle, I just say just fucking Batman symbol every short rest.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean...
like, oh, the fight's over. You want to get your shit back? Yeah, you short rest.
There you go. Go for it. Yeah.
You know.
And there's still limitations on short rests. Like, you still can only use X amount of hit die per your level or whatever. Like, so I
Warlock has narcolepsy. Exactly.
yes,
right.
Garrett, you're totally right.
Yeah.
But if you're a dungeon master and you're like, well, that kind of sounds overpowered. It's like, honestly, it really isn't. Like, it's only overpowered if you, as the dungeon master, let it be overpowered. You know what I mean? Like, if they're going to be doing that often, then you do have to kind of challenge them a little bit more. And that's just how, you have to balance it. And I hear everything that you're saying. Now that you've sort of had that counterpoint, and I completely agree with you. I think we should get into some of the features with the Warlock, especially on the base, in the base class, just the baseline of the class, just because there are some features when you get towards the higher levels that are just fucking awesome, especially like with Pact of the Fiend. You get some really gnarly shit.
Yeah.
And to get back to the just to try to like sell you on the no spell slot thing maybe a little bit more, I would like to see those types of features implemented to where as you're leveling up, you don't necessarily get a higher level spell that you can feel like you can just be like, all right, Demon Daddy, let me do the crazy shit. Yeah. Instead of the spell, you get like a very specific flavored feature like you would with I'm thinking of I think it's called Cast into Hell or something, or Drag to Hell or something or whatever, with the Fiend Pact. Like, you get something like that where you're like, all right, like once a day or once every short rest or whatever, I can do this one thing that's very specific to my class that no other class can do. And it's just fucking gnarly. You know what I mean?
At the end of the day, whatever system you use, I'm always about more unique spells.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think the only downside to it is that every time you're playing a new class, you're like, what the fuck are all these new spells? I don't know any of these.
Right.
But I know that the designers view that as a problem because, it's just, there's less recognizable, takes a little more time to learn. But as a player, that's what I want, man. I want those unique spells. I think there should be way less overlap between spell slots.
I completely agree.
You still need between spell lists.
Yeah.
You definitely still need some because the premise is that this magic exists in the world.
Yeah, of course.
But I think it should be, instead of like 2 or 3 unique spells per class, I think it should be like more like, I don't know. 10.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that would also just automatically make the wizard feel a little bit even cooler, because the idea of the wizard is that you have such a large spell list that encompasses a lot of the other classes spell list too, and that's what makes wizard interesting, other than just being like every other class is just flavored wizard. You know what I mean? But yeah, let's jump into some of the Warlock features. I do want to just to give an example of what I'm talking about with like the level of power on certain things. I want to immediately take a look at Pact of the Fiend Warlock and take a look at that drag to. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but drag to hell or whatever. Or pass through hell.
Normally we read all this shit, but we've been talking for a while about the Warlock flavor-wise.
I think you guys have a good understanding of what it is.
Just to hit you with the highlights, they're charisma casters. Yeah. They are known spellcasters, so they don't prepare from the whole list like druids do and wizards do, sort of.
Kind of, yeah.
They're similar to bards in that they're known spellcasters. We talked about their pack magic, where they get fewer spell lots, much fewer spell slots, but they refresh every time they short rest. So depending on your campaign, you might cast more or less spells. and as they level up, all of their spell slots become higher level. So in practice, at least, they seem like they cast more high level spells, but fewer spells in general. So less utility, more bangers. And then they have their unique cantrip, Eldritch Blast, which is just a really good damage cantrip. I think Warlock should just get it, by the way, because they only get like 2 cantrips. Just give it to them.
Yeah, just that should just be built in. Yeah. They shouldn't have to pick that. That's very weird that they have to pick it.
I think in general, Wizards of the Coast should be more generous with cantrips.
Oh, I completely agree.
Sure. Like every class should automatically get 1 cantrip.
Yep.
For wizards, it should be prestidigitation. And I think it should be specific.
Oh, 100%.
I think it should be the prestidigitation, druidcraft, thaumaturgy type cantrip.
Vicious mockery,
Vicious mockery for bard, and obviously Eldritch Blast for
Warlock.
For Warlock, because otherwise they're just going to take it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't take it, it just feels weird.
Or they're not. The problem is like if you don't take like prestidigitation, right? Because you think, oh well, I really want Firebolt. And I really want, or whatever it is, and I really want whatever. The thing is, you're just going to have less fun. You're going to have less fun for the sake of being powerful because you think you don't need it and you want those things. And then the other thing is they get this whole menu of sort of almost like mini feats called Eldritch Invocations.
Yeah.
And sort of like what you were talking about, a lot of them, there's 4, I think, that augment Eldritch Blast, let you,
which is super fun.
Push enemies back,
so
super
cool.
Fun. Push them back, do extra damage, pull them forward. And I think the other one is
it's a huge range.
Yeah, so
you can hit them from 300 feet. Nuts, which is awesome.
Yeah,
it's so cool.
There's that very impractical, not very group friendly build where you take Spell Sniper feet and you can Eldritch Blast from 600 feet away.
It's so funny.
And
you're just never with the party. You're just fucking sniping people.
You can actually take the sharpshooter feat as well.
Oh,
because that's all ranged attacks.
That's right. That's right.
Just with a crossbow or with a bow. So you could from 600 feet shoot with no ability to have cover.
It's just a little homing missile.
Yeah.
Or multiple homing missiles because at higher levels you get to shoot like 3 or 4 of them or whatever.
Exactly. So anyway. And the Eldritch Invocations, they do anything from that to like giving you access to like wizard spells like Levitate or Misty Step or Polymorph, to like the very famous one. One of the very famous ones is getting this Devil's Sight, which lets you see even in magical darkness, which is a very unique thing to be able to do. Each Warlock gets a Pact. There's 4 Pacts now. Mm-hmm. One lets you be more like a fighter. Pact of the Blade. One lets you be more like a wizard. Pact of the Tome lets you cast more cantrips. One lets you be, one lets you get sort of leveled up familiars, which in a way is kind of wizardy as well, but in a different way. And they're just like excellent scouts and things, and you can use them for combat a little bit too. And then the last one is Pact of the Talisman, which is kind of just like the more warlock type of thing. Like it's kind of like if you don't really want to do any of these other 3, maybe do this one. It's kind of interesting.
It's again, that's one of my problems where it's like, well, this feels like it should just sort of be built into the class already, which is another sort of quantification of like when we're rating these classes. To me, it's a problem if there's a feature of your class that you have to choose that just feels like, well, why isn't this just a thing that I do? You know what I mean?
I'm more okay with it with features because I don't necessarily mind there being a default option if you're not necessarily excited about any of the other spicier ones.
Sure.
I like it less when it's a subclass.
It's much worse when it's a subclass, in my opinion.
Pact of the Talisman, I'm okay with. It's whatever. And then effectively they get all the way up to 9th level spellcasting. So that's kind of the base class. And then we wanted to talk about Pact. We wanted to jump right to Pact of the Fiend.
Yes.
And their magic, flavor-wise, if it wasn't obvious, they've made some kind of contract with some all-powerful entity. There's Fiend, Archfey. Initially, it was Fiend, Archfey, and Great Old One, which would be kind of like a Eldritch, Cthulhu type
entity.
Since then, they've created the Fathomless, which is kind of like a deep sea,
which is fun,
elder
very
creature,
fun.
Or whatever. There's the Genie Pact now,
also very fun,
and the Hexblade, which is very kind of like mysterious, but I think it's supposed to maybe be the Raven Queen. Who knows?
Yeah.
But anyway. And your relationship with that entity is what has granted you your spellcasting and defines the subclasses.
Yes.
And they each give you unique abilities beyond the base class. Did you want to go through this? Or do you want
just real quick. So Pact of the Fiend is kind of your quintessential, like if there was anyone who just sort of thinks about your usual warlocks, it's either going to be Pact of the Fiend or Pact of the Great Old One, because Great Old One is sort of your like we just mentioned, your classic sort of Cthulhu, like weird maddening entity that is just like unfathomable. And then Pact of the Fiend is your usual like it's a devil or a demon that you have this contract with. Usually more so with the devil because devils classically in Dungeons and Dragons deal with contracts specifically, and demons are more super chaotic and just want like carnage and all that.
Wait,
but
Garrett, you have a wizard warlock hybrid. You monster.
You monster.
What are you even doing?
Foolishness.
And actually, yeah, I like your idea for short rest to kind of.
Oh yeah, I was reading that. And I was like,
based
that's
on
pretty
context. That's pretty cool. That's definitely the kind of thing as a DM I would just be like, yeah, you guys have been just kind of casually walking, and you're probably, and you do this too. Like, yeah, you've probably short rested.
Yeah, you just kind of play it by ear as a dungeon master on short rest. To be totally honest with you, I do have a feat that I follow that Matt Mercer made up in I think it originally came out in like the first Exandria guide. Where essentially you can choose to, it's called Arduous Rally. You can essentially choose to gain the benefits of a short rest within like a minute or 5 minutes or something like that. If you don't have time to take like the 30-minute or to an hour rest that you like would actually need, and then after X amount of time you suffer like an exhaustion point or something like that. So like if you're in a gauntlet, or if you're like, oh fuck, like we need to get to this next place, but we really need to rest, you can be like, all right, everyone's gonna Arduous Rally. I've actually never seen, I'm pretty sure it's been a part of like all 3 campaigns. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've actually never seen them use it, which is hilarious because I don't think that they talk about it enough, because I think it's a really cool feature. Anyways, getting back in, so it's called Hurl Through Hell. So this is an example, Pact of the Fiend Warlock, where if I was redesigning it, I would try to get away from spell slots and I would get more towards class specific features that you get, leveled features that allow you to essentially mimic spell casting. It's really just you're using this feature. It is inherently arcane or deific because you are calling on this power. It's spell casting, but it's not spell slot using. I love this idea of like some specific thing with the class, like we talked about before. Any more class specificity in our opinion is better, just because it feels good. But Hurl Through Hell, so this starts at the 14th level. So this is an example of a very powerful feature that you can use as a warlock. It says, starting at the 14th level, when you hit a creature with an attack, so this could be your Eldritch Blast, you can use this feature to instantly transport the target through the lower planes. The creature disappears and hurtles through a nightmare landscape. There's no save, by the way. It's just you have to hit, which is, I like that idea because with Warlock, you start to move away from, like, if you keep this philosophy, you start to move away from spell saves, and you're just sort of solely reliant on your spell attack modifier, which I think is a cooler version of like, spell casting generally. There's a lot more spell saves than there are spell attacks. I think that's honing in on this is a little bit more interesting.
I could definitely see that being something where, especially if you make the subclasses more defining in the, like, let's say you did keep spell slots, but you made the subclasses like I would almost even say like, just because you get so much choice in invocations, you could almost even eliminate choice in spells and just be like, these are the spells you get. Yeah. And they're incredibly iconic for your fiend, for your pact. So if you're fiend pact, you get fireball and you get blah, blah, blah. And then you could add more unique spells. And that's why I just say, like, it might be two halves of the same coin, but I totally agree with you that I would like to see more specific stuff, especially because, like, you don't want to see every spellcaster have to take the same spells all the time.
Right.
I
completely agree. Yeah. So there's no save. You just hit. And if you hit, you can choose to invoke this at the end of your next turn. Right. So this is the entirety of a whole round and then your whole next turn. Right. So there's a lot of in-game, or excuse me, at table time that is passing that you can inflict this upon any creature as long as you're hitting their DC. It could be the fucking Tarask, and you can do this to them, right? So as long as you're hitting them, at the end of your next turn, the target returns to the space it previously occupied or the nearest unoccupied space. If the target is not a fiend, it takes 10d10 psychic damage as it reels from its horrific experience. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. So thematically, It's really fucking cool. Mechanically, it literally is just if you hit once a day, you can cause them to suffer, or you can cause them to be banished essentially for a whole round, so you don't have to deal with anything. And then upon their return, they automatically take 10d10 psychic damage, which for most cases is unavoidable damage. There are some niche monsters that
don't send a robot to hell.
Exactly.
But yeah.
So there are some niche monsters, like I said, but most of the time this is just automatic banish and automatic 10d10 on any creature, regardless of, except for a fiend, or a creature that would be even if they are immune to psychic damage, it's just a straight up fucking automatic banish. Yep. Like you just get a banish on a hit, which is fucking gnarly.
Which is awesome.
So like that's and the flavoring around that you send them through the 9 hells is fucking cool.
Hell yeah.
You know what I mean? And like it gives the dungeon master an opportunity to describe, like you hit them with the way I would describe it off the top of my head as a dungeon master would be like, oh, I want to hit with a Eldritch Blast. All right, go ahead and roll the hit. 26. All right, yeah, you hit. You send this this mote of purple energy forward that darts out of your hand, slams into the chest of this of this adult ancient dragon or something like that, and it starts to course through its body, and as it sort of starts to sink into its veins, you see the excess purple energy slap out of its body onto the ground, pulling it towards the ground. And as this purple energy pulls this great creature towards the earth cracks with that same purple energy, opening up, and the creature sort of starts to writhe, trying to keep itself up into the plains, but it is eventually dragged down through the depths of the earth, and then the earth closes back up under it, and you can faintly hear in the back of your head the screams of this ancient dragon for this round. You know what I mean? Like that's just something you can do at the 14th level, and that's fucking cool. And then that makes you feel cool as a player. It makes me feel good as a DM because I have this sort of niche thing that I can describe. So I'm not always saying like, yep, you hit with your Eldritch Blast and purple shit comes out of your hand. It could be any color, but my default for Eldritch is purple. Purple shit comes out of your hand, you hit it. Good job. You know what I mean? Like it's just anytime you get an opportunity as a dungeon master and as a player to do something at the table that is unique, it will always feel the best than if you just are like, oh, okay, I know this fireball is going to kill this group of enemies, like I'm gonna use it, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, getting a kill is fun in D&D, but like getting a specific feature off that feels cool and like happens is, in my opinion, a little bit more special. So yeah, Eldritch anything is a sickly green, go fuck yourself, Garrett. It's always been purple. I don't give a shit.
What is sending somebody to hell have to do with Eldritch something?
That's also true.
Come on, Garrett. Get your shit together.
It's red.
This guy's out here. This guy's out here making wizard warlocks. Did you follow multi-class requirements for your wizard, for your child wizard? Did
I sure hope you did.
Charisma? Because if not, you really fucked it.
You super fucked it.
Super fucked.
I do want to read it since
Mika, will you ban this man, please?
Please ban this man. No. So actually, Garrett did outline. I do want to read this to set a precedent for like if anybody redeems any bits or whatever to do this. He's a kid wizard that got sucked into a plot to gain absolute power and his body back after it was destroyed when he was used in a demonic ritual that corrupted his soul, so it can't technically be resurrected or reincarnated. So it was sort of a necessity.
He's a boy detective, so he also has high int.
He's a boy detective, baby.
Somebody check this man's dice.
I love it.
This boy's got 18s across the board.
You rolled pretty high for your current character, didn't you?
Dude, I did.
You did.
Which is why I purposely nerfed him, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. I remember, I think on one of the TikToks that I uploaded recently, someone commented and was like, oh, this is really cool. And then like the second comment, they said it like, oh, also the turtle has like this, and this, and like, holy shit. And I go, yeah, Matt rolled really well when he made the character. That shit was hilarious.
Yeah, I rolled stupid when I made kill, and so I purposely took a less powerful subclass and I gave him high strength for no reason.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Other than because it's very fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a departure, but when I rolled those stats, I was like, I could make a paladin that would break the game for everybody.
Yeah.
Paladins are also good support party members. People love having paladins in the party, so I don't know if it would have been unfun necessarily.
Yeah.
But I could have made the nastiest paladin with those stats, and I was just like, I'm gonna make a fucking dumbass turtle.
Yeah, hell yeah. So I actually, on that note, I think I want to wrap up here, and I know that we didn't really talk too much about specifics on the features. I kind of want to take this into next episode and sort of make a part 2. I would love for us to, you know, over the week, maybe just think about, and I'm going to sit down and try to like redesign the class in sort of the spirit of what I was talking about of getting rid of the spell slots. I'm not asking you to redesign the class as well, but I kind of want to reapproach this next week and sort of bring each of us to the table and try to sell to the other one like, hey, I actually did think about this. Here's my redesign for the base of the Warlock. What do we think now? My current rating for it, after we talked and sort of I heard your explanation of like, actually it does feel pretty cool when you like upcast these things and you have these situations. I actually do want to bump my rating up from B to A. I don't think that it's S tier because I think we've talked about its inherent sort of feels bad problems, especially with like the fantasy and the mechanical sort of connection that we're trying to figure out. But for the most part, it's still my favorite class. I fucking love it. I think it's super fun.
I actually have very few problems with the Warlock.
Sure.
Other than I don't like things in general that are very DM dependent, and the short rest thing is a DM dependent. Yeah. But like, there's lots of things like that. I'm not going to hold it against it. Yeah. I definitely think Warlock is close to S. But I think A is where it belongs. It's just a little less. It's just a little less gives you everything than the Druid does. It takes a little bit more work to figure it out. There's a few options that are just a little bit too optimizy in the sense that it becomes hard to not take them. Right. And Eldritch Blast should just be given for free.
Yeah, you should just.
By the way, Sal just gave me Druidcraft for free.
Yeah, I don't,
because I was like, hey Sal, can I have Druidcraft? And he's like,
yeah, like well, you should just Druid should just auto. I don't understand why that's not like a you have to pick that. It makes no sense to me.
I also think not to take anything away from like sorcerers, I think that's very important, but I think that those free cantrips for all the classes, I'd have to think a little bit more about Eldritch Blast, but like Druidcraft and Prestidigitation, those should just all be subtle. And the reason I think that is because when you imagine it, nobody's like, oh, kill the turtle with this connection to mushrooms and nature is like actually casting a spell to make things bloom. It just feels like be able to. They just go like they just close, or like even with like when Garrett's using thaumaturgy to make his eyes glow. Yeah, and I did this as revelry. Like nobody's like, oh, the tiefling stands over and waves his arms around and then his eyes glow. No, it's just like his eyes just glow and it's fucking menacing and cool. Yeah.
I think thaumaturgy, I think it's just verbal, but even then, even still, it should. I agree with you, and I might start playing around with that.
We're basically already doing it.
Yeah, we are pretty much already doing it.
Yeah, I make this thing bloom on my back, and then I like pluck a mushroom and I make it grow back. You're never like, yes, you see Kill wave his fucking arms around, and
it's just mechanically right now. And we can get into this, next week and stuff too. Or if you guys want to hear more about like my philosophy on how I DM certain things, mechanically, it just kind of feels weird when you have a sorcerer in the party and, you have a bard who wants to like read people's minds and stuff, but like if you read the detect thoughts spell, you have to do all these different components and stuff.
100%.
And it's just like, well, you have to be out of the way to do that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Otherwise, someone's gonna look at you and be like, "Hey, you're casting a fucking spell. Why are you doing that?"
I definitely think using the components is important. Yeah. I just think that for those cantrips, for the sake of the fantasy, I think it would be nice if everybody just...
And we might play around with that. Why not?
We've done 4 classes now. Maybe when we get halfway through, we take a little break and we talk about, some other topics if we want.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. And to real quick before we go, Michaela, we'll show you the tier list next week when we decide where we actually really want to set Warlock like in its place. Also because like I didn't have it pulled up already.
Theater of the Mind this week.
Yes, Theater of the Mind. So just imagine Warlock currently at A tier. We may or may not be moving it next week, but we're going to be solidifying it next week with episode 2. And Garrett had a really good idea of maybe end up making a DMing philosophy videos for YouTube or Patreon. I think that's a great idea. I do want to start producing a little bit more Dungeon Master specific videos, so whether or not those end up going on our eventual Patreon that we will be setting up soon, or if those go directly to YouTube, I think we could probably do a best of both worlds situation there. But yeah, look out for that. We're gonna have a lot more production going into the channel, and some more stuff being uploaded to YouTube and all these things in the near future. So keep an eye out. If you're not subscribed, take a look at the YouTube channel. Take a look at all of our social medias. Follow us on Twitter. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Michaela, if you wouldn't mind linking our socials and our Discord in chat, that would be wonderful. But yeah, I think right now we've had a really wonderful discussion about sort of class philosophy and the Warlock in general. So thanks for all of you guys who jumped in and joined for the first time. That's super cool. Thanks for the raid. Shouts out to the Dicey and Andy crew that came around. That was really cool of you guys. Hopefully we'll see you. If you've never tuned in to our actual live play show, that we do those on every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on this channel. We play. We've been playing for a while. We're going to be on episode 24 next week. We're in the middle of a really exciting arc. I think it's basically our second one. Everyone's level 5. They're trying to essentially liberate a whole town from under the tyranny of this, iron-fisted ruler, which is always a good time when you're trying to do that. So definitely join us next Wednesday. If you want to catch up on what's been going on, you can always check out our YouTube channel. We've got a lot of content there. It's a lot to sift through, so I understand if it's like overwhelming. I totally get that. But if you just want to jump in next Wednesday and just sort of pick off where we're picking off as well, we also have a Tuesday show where we basically rewatch some of the players jump in, me as the DM jump in and answer some questions about what happened on the week prior. We're going to be revisiting episode 23 from a couple weeks ago. So I would highly suggest checking us out next Tuesday at about 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch us talking about the shows there. So all of our socials. Thank you, Michaela. Appreciate that. And thank you to Auntie B, who says that it is a lot of fun to watch. I do hope that that is going to continue to be the case.
Yeah.
So
thanks, Auntie.
Yeah, hell yeah. So we will see you guys next Tuesday here on this channel for Reroll, where we'll be rewatching episode 23 and talking about some fun, iconic moments from that episode. And then we will also see you next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on A Little Dicey D&D to watch us play our episode 24 of The Great Nelidian Crown. So thank you guys very much, and we will catch you next time.
Hell yeah.
Peace.
See ya.
Fuck yeah, brother.